Hello everybody. Last week I received an email from Ferrari asking me if I'd like to join them in Turin. And here I am with an example of the brand new Roma, all mine for the entire day. However, there is a small problem. You see, this will almost certainly not be the first video that you've seen on this car, and many others are being shot today and the rest of this month. So why should you watch this particular video? After all, I am staying in the same beautiful hotel as everyone else, eating the same delicious Piedmontese cuisine, and of course driving the precise same cars. In fact, because I am without an assistant for this trip, I'll even be using the same breathtaking B-roll footage provided to me by Ferrari as likely everyone else. So what have I got? Well, there's only one thing I can think of. Total and complete transparency. I am going to be brutally honest with the Roma, and I think really the car deserves it. Let's be honest, the Ferrari range has been expanding reasonably rapidly of late, and to many, I think the Roma runs the risk of being one Ferrari too many. After all, you could look at it and the spec sheet and say, well, that's just a Portofino coupe, isn't it? And really you'd think, what is the point in that when the Portofino already comes with a hardtop anyway? However, having now sat through all of the briefings and read the literature, there are two important things you need to know about the Roma. Number one, it is not a Portofino coupe. Number two, if you already own a Ferrari, you are not really the target audience for this car. 15 years ago, your entry point into the world of Ferrari ownership was going to be something like an F430, a two-seater supercar. But in that time, the world has changed an awful lot, and now environmental and social ideas are often the top of people's agendas. And so this is a car designed to be a lot less showy. This is a car all about class and glamour rather than bling. This is a no excuses Ferrari. This is a car that the Italians want you to drive at every single available opportunity. I mean, look, there's no windshield on it. It's even available in silver. All right, Grigio Titanium. But this is a car that they've styled to fly a little bit under the radar. Still to give you great driving pleasure, but they want it to be the sort of car that you can enjoy without everybody looking at you. Kind of odd, because the launch film featured a pair of these driving through the middle of a town with everybody looking at it. Hey-ho. In terms of styling, this car is a real step change from what has gone before. In fact, compared to Portofino, it does genuinely look like a completely different car. And that's both outside and in. The front end, I love. Wasn't sure about it when I first saw pictures, but in the flesh, it looks magnificent, especially in a nicer colour like Blue Corsa or Rosso Portofino, which we've got a couple of examples of floating about today. I have been assigned this Grigio example. The rear, I'm still coming to terms with, and if I'm honest, it's my least favourite part of the car. I'm not so keen on the overall shape. I don't like this sort of two-part shape of car, which has become very popular in the last few years, F-Type, the new Astons and so on, but Ferrari have done it as well as anybody can. It's going to take a bit longer for me to work out whether I do or don't like this rear end, and there are little features that bug me, like this active spoiler here, which does produce genuine downforce when it needs to, but looks kind of apologetically small. You also can't control it yourself because, well, that's just chavvy, isn't it? This car even has a petrol particulate filter, making owning a Ferrari even more socially acceptable than ever before. But if you are familiar with the brand, it's what they've done on the inside that'll shock you the most. This car completely does away with all of the styling Ferrari have been using since more or less the 458. So, gone is the center tacho with its pair of screens, and instead is this great big LCD. It's clear, it's bright, actually kind of easy to use. The wheel, a famous Ferrari thing, has also been somewhat redesigned. Most of this is now capacitive, touch-sensitive pads. It seems like it'd be a little bit complicated to use, but I've played with it for a while. It's actually not too bad. You've also got a portrait screen here in the center. In this particular car, the passenger display over there as well, and you've got a new style of gear selector here. This is all inspired by the new interior which you've seen also in the SF90, and I expect it's going to be rolled out across the entire Ferrari range over the next few years. This doesn't actually work like I thought it would. It looks like you can slide those, but you don't. They're buttons, which is a shame, but they look kind of cool. This wheel is nice to use and to hold, and I'm slowly getting to grips with all of the controls. It is quirky in the way that you'd expect all Italian cars to be, but it's not bad. And there's some other really nice practical stuff too, like the fact that you've got folding rear seats so you can store slightly unusually shaped items. That I did not expect. And there's a genuinely usefully sized boot. I can get a big bag in there. What's going on, Ferrari? So it's cleaner, greener, full of technology, it's practical, it's usable, and it's even available in silver. Is this a boring Ferrari? Have they completely forgotten all of us petrolhead types? Fortunately, no. Of course, Ferrari being Ferrari couldn't make a new car without doing something engine-wise. Now, this is a 3.9 litre twin-turbo V8 from the same family as that you'll find in the Lusso T, Portofino and the F8. Here it produces 620 horsepower thanks to a combination of entirely different cams, a different valve setup, and some other trickery in comparison with Portofino. It's also mated to a brand new 8-speed double clutch gearbox. And the gearbox is actually dry sumped, it can cope with more power and torque and is lighter than the outgoing 7-speed. It changes gears even faster, and Ferrari have fitted special new sensors on the turbos, meaning they can spin 5,000 RPM more. You've got peak torque for another 500 RPM, and overall, this is still an excellent power plant. Thanks to the use of more lightweight materials under the skin and of course a fixed roof, this car is nearly 100 kilos lighter than Portofino. It also has significantly wider track, both front and rear. Despite the fitment of those particulate filters, Ferrari have redesigned the catalytic converters and almost completely eliminated the silencers at the rear, meaning that they've managed to minimize the loss of performance and also keep the weight penalty down. Unlike Portofino, you get a 5-position Manettino switch, including a race setting, which in Ferrari's own words is the one for having the most fun. And that's been enabled thanks to the fitment of side slip control number 6, which apparently is a piece of software that will make all of your Chris Harris dreams a reality. So, all told, the Roma should be not just the most practical and usable Ferrari ever, but also one that's a heck of a lot of fun to drive. Is it? Well, I don't know yet. I've only driven it half a mile on gravel to get it here to take photos. It should be good for £171,000, but I suppose I ought to check. I think I've worked out the difference between the English and the Italians. English cyclists want you to go to hell. Italian cyclists want you to go faster. Everything you've ever heard about the Italians and their love of cars and great food is very true indeed. And truthfully, this car, much like the many lunches that we've had this week, is a very multi-layered affair. There's a lot going on. As a daily driver, this is truly a superb car. If you can live with the storage capacity that it has, which by the standards of this segment is actually quite impressive, it's brilliant. It is extraordinarily comfortable. I mean, really obscenely so. This morning when we left, we drove almost immediately through a little cobbled piazza, the sort of thing that might shake your fillings out even in an S-Class. The Roma absolutely took it in its stride. This car, like every Ferrari since the 430 Scuderia, has a bumpy road mode button, which in the sportier settings on the Manettino, so Sport, Race and ESC off, will decouple the suspension from the rest of the programming. In other words, you can have soft suspension with your aggressive everything else. It works superbly. As hard as Ferrari's engineers might try, the incredibly restrictive new rules on exhaust noise and particulates and everything mean that it has lost its voice somewhat. It's not a bad sounding car, but not a great one. What do you think? That little spoiler at the back pops up at a certain speed, and its angle of attack is linked directly to how aggressively you're driving, not just the speed at which you're going. The majority of time it runs in what they call a sort of medium setting, which gives you an appreciable amount of downforce at the cost of only 1% of extra drag. Even in its full-on attack mode, where it's generating something like 95 kilos of downforce at, I believe, about 150 mile an hour, it only increases drag by 4%. With the... This is a pre-production car, so certain things aren't quite production ready yet. I assume the pinch sensor on the windows is probably one of them, as is the electronics here, although in fairness I haven't really noticed any issues at all. Now, this whole new interior concept for me is a 50-50 success rate. The screens are fabulous, really like them, very clear, very easy to follow, and maybe not quite as intuitive as Audi's virtual cockpit, but considering the extremely limited resources that Ferrari have in comparison, I think this is a triumph. However, the method by which you operate this new display, I'm not so in love with. All of the capacitive controls on the steering wheel just seem a little bit unnecessarily finicky. I would prefer more concrete buttons. I don't see what was quite wrong with the buttons in the first place, and at no point in time have I gone, oh, that's something you could never do with a button. And to me, that's a shame. It's little things like the side of your mirrors control. They're down here where you'd expect them to be, but they're also a touchpad, and doing this to adjust your side of your mirrors just doesn't really come very naturally, I've got to be honest. This screen in the middle here is reasonably easy to use. It's got an odd look to it, I have to say. It looks like, rather than an iPad being glued to the screen, it's like someone's taken a Panasonic Toughbook and wedged it into the middle of the Roma. But it also works well, I have to say. I'm not such a fan of the seats. Now, of course, you can get different ones for the car, and I would have something a lot sportier. That's me. These are comfortable, but they don't really offer anything at all in the way of lateral support. For a car with such a luxury focus and a fairly high price tag, I would also expect these seats to now be cooled as well as heated. Pretty much everyone else does it, so I think Ferrari need to add that to their to-do list. One feature I can't test out on this car for a couple of reasons is Apple Carplay. Number one, because I don't have an Apple phone, and number two, because it hasn't been activated yet. However, to my surprise, Ferrari tell me that not only will Apple CarPlay be available very shortly, essentially when the cars get delivered, so too will Android Auto. And that is music to my ears, because for years Ferrari have charged you something like £2,500 for CarPlay, and Auto hasn't even been an option. I mean, it would take a little of the sting out if the £2,500 got you Android Auto as well, but it never did. And so I'm glad to see them moving forwards slowly in that regard. Ferrari's marketing would tell us that this is a Formula One in evening attire, which I think is pushing it a little bit. But the main line for this car is something they call La Nuova Dolce Vita. The idea that in the 1950s and 60s there was this beautiful, carefree attitude that was characterized by Rome at that point in time. And that's why this car is called the Roma. The idea of this car is to sort of reinvent that for the 21st century, or for the 2020s more accurately. And you can't simply just jump in a great big filthy old V12 and just dart about the place without caring anymore. That's just not the world we live in. Ferrari want to make this car as guilt-free as they possibly can. I did ask them whether there were any plans for other engine options in this car. I figured this would be the car to debut something like a hybrid V6 or a smaller capacity engine, but they said no, we've done the maths and we've reckoned that a twin turbocharged 3.9 litre V8 is definitely the way to go. As a car to soak up the miles, the Roma really is perfection. You've got all the toys and tricks you would want in here, with the exception of those cooled seats. And there are a few other odd omissions, like the fact it has a soft close boot, but not soft closed doors. But other than that, it is the complete package. However, I think even the most ardent Ferrari fan is unlikely to be buying this simply as a motorway cruiser. You want to know what it does when you're on a more demanding road, don't you? Well, let's find out. The first thing, honestly, that gets you, other than the incredible damping, is the gearbox. This new 8-speed is one of those technological marvels where I've looked at all the many pages of diagrams and flow charts and things explaining how it could be all sorts of ways better than the old 7-speed. The small problem being, the 7-speed was absolutely fabulous, and I couldn't possibly imagine how they'd improve on it. And yet, they have. This is sensational. It's faster and smoother. And this road is slippy. You're probably going to notice most of the journalists coming back from this test drive saying it, but believe me, this really is like driving on glass, so I have to exercise some degree of caution. There's a man in a Golf GTI behind me who's no doubt trying to impress the Ferrari owner. Go for it. You kill yourself, matey, I don't really care. Oh, she's lively. Oh, Jesus wept. This road. I swear an olive oil truck must have come down here and shed its load, because it's like 30-something degrees out there. 34, there we go. And I'm on Michelin Pilot Sport 4S, one of many different tyres you could have for this car, and probably the ones I would go for. This should have no problem gripping, even with 620 horsepower and two-wheel drive. No problem at all, but this is all over the shop. I don't think it's the car, I honestly don't. It could not be that bad. Just to show you how well calibrated this gearbox and engine are, watch me plant my foot in full auto mode in 6th. The change is so fast I can't even get my camera back up to the dash before the car's already done its thing and is flying towards the horizon. So next up, engine. Well, it, or versions of it, have won Engine of the Year many times in a row. And this one is no disappointment. I mean, it makes serious power and serious torque all the time. Absolutely fabulous. I recently drove the Bentley Continental GT W12 and I had quite a few issues with the power plant in that car. This one really does show people how you do a turbocharged engine. It's punchy, it's characterful, it's responsive, revs to about 7,500, and my life, it's effective. It really is. This is not a slow car. There are some dynamic weaknesses. Steering, historically always a bit of a sticking point for Ferraris. It's not bad, but neither is it particularly brilliant. It's fast, like all modern day Ferraris are, and you can certainly point the car where you want it to go, and it will indeed follow. But there does seem to be just a real disconnect between you and the road. I don't really feel the tarmac like I really want to. The brakes, similarly, are just a little bit too grabby when you're at sort of low and medium speeds. As you start to push on, they're fine and they respond just nicely. But I would really like it that you have to give a little bit more effort to get them to do their job, because they're just too sensitive. The view out the front is superb. See what I mean about that tail? So I'm driving in race mode. I've dabbled a little bit with the ESC off, but honestly, not enough room here. I might try it again in a little bit, but I'm not going to bin a Ferrari just to try and pretend that I'm Chris Harris, because I'm not. The worrying bit is not so much the wiggling under acceleration. I can deal with that, no problem at all. It's when you go to turn in and the thing starts to wash wide. And it means, unfortunately, that this road really is masking, I think, a lot of the capabilities of this car. Now, I was in sport mode there, and sport mode will certainly intervene a heck of a lot sooner than race. Race lets you get pretty out of shape on the tail end before it cuts in. Okay, here we got grip. Oh yes. And brake and turn in, and will it stick? Sort of. Front washes a bit, then rear washes a bit, and it all kind of comes around and collects itself. I mean, in all fairness, the car's giving me confidence to try. It's pretty rare for me in a press car to want to explore how it oversteers, much less in a £200,000 Ferrari on roads I don't know, but you do quickly feel at home and somewhat confident in the Roma's abilities. I must say, I've also found myself on quite a few occasions just stopping to take photos of the car. Not the sort of thing that I usually do, because there's no real point for me being a video person, but the looks are rapidly growing on me. Kind of spoils it, you know, when it's parked next to 7 other very similar looking cars. Quite convinced that it's best in blue Corsa specifically, but it would suit a lot of other colours. Just please don't get it in silver. Don't do that. Visibility in town is usually good. It's only at certain junctions where this really steeply raked A pillar and then C pillar are anything of an issue. But I can now demonstrate the amazingness of the suspension. Look at the quality of this surface, and then I'm going to switch now to my front camera, and you can see what it's like. Yeah, you stay there, please, sir. I'm pretty impressed with the suspension on the Roma, I have to say. It is incredible, and it is also proof that one does not need to make a car bone-shakingly stiff in order for it to be sporty or capable. You just don't. I'm quite confident that when Ferrari came up with the Nuova Dolce Vita, they didn't mean stuck in roadworks behind a diesel X-Type. Don't think that's what they meant. Oh, thank God. Get over, you idiot. The new Ferrari Roma then, should you or should you not? I'm not going to talk about the price, because only you can decide whether it's actually worth it, and by the time this video is 12, 24, 36 months old, they will have changed quite a bit. Anyway, I'm fairly confident. But is it the right kind of car for you? Well, ask yourself one simple question. Are you the sort of person for whom a dream Ferrari would be a 360 Challenge Stradale, 430 Scuderia, 458 Speciale, that sort of thing? If so, no. Don't buy one of these. Go buy a used 458, maybe even 488, something like that. Just don't do the Roma. However, if you're the sort of person that's maybe got, I don't know, a Mercedes SL, a Jaguar F-Type, and you want to upgrade to something a little bit more special, but that is still daily drivable, still usable, still exciting, still engaging, but just a bit more, then the Roma is an absolutely spectacular car. To drive, it is certainly better than Portofino. I think I'd probably still take Portofino myself, for the simple reason that I didn't really have too much of an issue with the twin screen setup. I prefer buttons on the steering wheel, and when the weather's this good, I want the roof to come down. Simple as that.
As I sat on the plane coming home, I had time to reflect on the Roma, what it really stood for, and what the car actually was. It certainly stands out enough in the range to earn its name. This genuinely isn't Portofino coupe. It looks unique inside and out, and it's a lot faster than just an extra 20 horsepower might suggest. Many say that Roma looks a lot like an Aston Martin or a Jaguar, but since this review was filmed, I had the chance to drive the new Vantage. I found a lot to love about that car, but it really did feel like Aston Martin had done their homework on the back of the bus and hastily handed it in. It's a rushed product. The Roma is a much more complete and rounded package and extremely well executed. What I think it might actually be is perhaps the closest Ferrari have come to a modern reinvention of the 550. The current two-seater V12 Ferraris are no longer what I consider to be Grand Tourers. They're too hyper-alert and obscenely fast for that. Despite the small seats in the back, the Roma feels personal and intimate in a way that a Lusso never can, and the new SUV certainly won't. The Roma dials things back just enough from its screaming V12 siblings. The steering, although fast, does still let you relax and enjoy the car. The engine, again, supremely capable, but it doesn't feel like it's trying to introduce you to God at every possible opportunity. And although the looks are still dramatic, they have with them a dash of understatement. It's luxurious, it's practical, and it is every inch still a proper Ferrari. The ride comfort is some of the best out there, but without compromise of slack in the bends. This is the best attempt at a small Grand Tourer in recent memory. Ferrari have had off days, I'll never say otherwise. There's plenty of cars in their back catalogue I have absolutely no lust for. And with Roma, I thought they were aiming for a target that seemed impossibly small and would almost certainly miss. Yet somehow they absolutely nailed it. If you want a Ferrari that not only you can use every day, but you'd actually want to, the Roma is it. If it's your first Ferrari, I warn you now, you're going to be spoiled. Thanks to everybody for watching. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks to Ferrari for having me out there, and I'll see you all for the next one. Bye bye.